We are familiar with the phrase we say in the Haggadah every year, quoting the shortened version of the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei Avotenu, vayar Hashem et onienu, v'et amalenu, v'et lachatzenu. We cried out to Hashem our God. That we're familiar with in the Haggadah, and the Midrash in the Haggadah already tells us that this refers to a pasuk in this week's Parashat Shemot, Sefer Shemot, which we begin this week. There we're told at the end of Perek Bet, Vayehi vayamim harabim hahem, vayamot melech Mitzrayim, vayanchu v'nei Yisrael min ha'avoda, vayiz'aku, v'tal shavatam el ha'elokim min ha'avoda. Vayiz'aku, vanitzak, or za'aka and sa'aka are often interchangeable in Tanakh. However, the Torah only tells us that Bnei Yisrael cried out. It does not say that they cried out to God. Without dealing with the differences between the description in Devarim and the description in Shemot, what does this phrase actually mean? So to answer this, let's look at some psukim in next week's parasha. When Moshe comes to Bnei Yisrael and informs them of Hashem's plans, we're told that Bnei Yisrael did not listen or accept or understand or obey. There are different interpretations to the phrase V'lo shamu'u el Moshe mikotze ruach umei avoda kasha. They could not do anything, they could not accept, they could not listen to what Moshe said because they were so overwhelmed with hard work. Actually reminds me of a time when I went with the yeshiva to visit friends of mine who were in the army, in Shiur, in the armored corps. And I met a friend of mine there who had not been learning yeshivat Arutzion, he was learning in another yeshiva, but he'd been my friend in school. And I said hello to him. And he didn't respond. Why didn't he respond? Because at that point, the belt, the strap of his gun had broken. And he didn't know how to fix it, and he didn't know how to put it back on. And he was worried he was going to have to continue for a while carrying the gun in his hand. And he was so overwhelmed by this thought, he was not open to any other discussion, not even saying hello to an old friend. In a similar way, Am Yisrael were not open to accepting anything that Moshe said. In this week's parasha, however, they got a break from work, as the Torah tells us. They got a break from work because of the change of leadership. And they cried out to God. Even crying they couldn't do while they were working, but now they had a chance. Now it is unclear that they even understood that they could cry out to God. They were so far removed from the religious world, but they knew that they had to cry. And the Torah conveys this idea that they were confused, that it was unclear whether they were crying out to God by the use of three different terms to describe their anguish. The Torah tells us, Vayanchu v'nei Yisrael min ha'avoda vayiz'aku, v'atal shavatam el ha'elokim min ha'avoda, and vayishma elokim et na'akatam. Three different phrases. It is possible that the wailing got more severe, and that za'aka, sha'ava, and na'aka represent an increase in the intensity of their crying, as Professor Amos Chacham in Dat Mikra suggests. But we can also suggest that the intensity increases in the eyes of God. They cried out. Once it reached God, it was za'aka. It was shav'a, and eventually it was na'aka. The Rasag explains na'akatam as bechi chozer, recurring crying and anguish. That is what Hashem heard. Meaning, Am Yisrael may simply have cried, but Hashem, as a father to all the people, to all our people, to his people, heard our anguish and recalled the brit that he made with the Avot. And this is similar to the situation described in Sefer Devarim, Perek Dalet, where the Torah talks about Galut, the horrible situation of Galut. And the Torah tells us that even while in Galut, Uvikashtem misham et Hashem elokecha umatzata, you will inquire, you will look for God, and you will eventually find Him. But two psukim that later the Torah tells us, Ki kel rachum Hashem Elokecha lo yishkach et berita lo yarpacha v'lo yashchitecha v'lo yishkach et berita avotecha asher nishba lahem. Maybe this means that even if we don't exactly find God, Hashem will still remember the Brit. Hashem is a kel rachum. He will remember us just as He did in Mitzrayim. This is probably the first event, that the description in this week's Parashat is the first time that Am Yisrael are davening as a nation. And we could suggest there are two messages here, which are relevant for us. Number one, even when we daven and we're not quite sure if our davening is worthwhile, how effective it has been, remember that tefillot will get to Hashem. Their intensity will get to Hashem. The fact that we've made an effort, that we've gone to shul, that we've said our tefillot, can become more powerful in Hashem's eyes. And secondly, the power of tefillah b'tzibur, which to some extent we're trying to gain in these days, even though we don't have the same barov am hadrat melech that we used to. The power of tefillah b'tzibur is so important, and it can affect, as in this week's parasha, complete and utter change in the world. Shabbat Shalom.